Welcome to the Uspire Engagement Cube think tank session today. My name is Pippa Dunford. I'm the managing partner for the Uspire Partnership, and I have lots of my fantastic team here today. Colin, the chairman, who'll be running most of this session. I have Chester over here, who's head of our sales, Joanne, operations, Rachel and Andy in sales and marketing. So give us the wave for those of you Uspire. So before we even crack on with anything technical, anything cerebral, I'm going to give you a technical challenge. I'd like you all to put in your name, to amend it on the screen to what your name and company is, to save us a lot of time on the chit chat. So if you click on your screen, on your square, there are 3 dots in the top right hand corner. If you click on there, you've got rename. Now, if you could rename yourself to the name that you'd like to be named today and the company that you're from, so we help us.
All suggestions welcome.
And while you're doing that, as in everything Uspire, you don't sit there and get bored. You're going to be interactive with us the whole way through. So the second instruction I'm going to give you today is on the chat. If there's a bottom icon down at the bottom called chat for those who are new to Zoom, and in there, I'd like you to put in what you'd like to get out of this session today. Now, I appreciate some of you are new. It might just be a welcome and introduction and say hi, but it might be a little bit more. We'd love to get your thoughts to make sure we're covering what you want to get through today as well. So I'm going to give you just 1 or 2 minutes to pop into the chat. What would you like to find out today? Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Richard. Curious to find out more. Absolutely. A first taste of Uspire. Good, you definitely will. So fingers at the ready, and your energy over the screen will come through. To learn something new. Absolutely. Engagement is what it's all about today. Hear the thoughts of everyone in the group. First meeting, understand the cube. Curious and hopefully some inspiration. Definitely want to do that. Looking to meet people and understand the format. I think that's a really great point. The Uspire network is all aimed at leaders, and for you to network and work with like-minded, like business individuals to share and mentor and work with and through various challenges, opportunities, thinking, anything like that through various formats. The think tank today is just one of those opportunities. What I would ask is please be involved. Talk to your colleagues, meet them all. You'll get plenty of chances throughout the session in breakout rooms to say hi and get to know a few other people. And it's up to you to network and meet and greet as many people as possible. Without further ado, thank you for all your objectives and what you'd like to get on today. We will collate those and make sure that by the end we are on track for you. So I'm going to hand over to Colin to kickstart us. So we have 2 hours for this session. So thanks very much.
Everybody, welcome to this journey through the engagement cube. Hope you can all hear me clearly. I'd like to kick off by just saying to Gallup, who we're talking about later, define engagement as the involvement and enthusiasm of employees in both their work and their workplace. Needless to say, they're not going to win a Pulitzer Prize, a Booker Prize for that definition. It leaves me incredibly cold. It's much more transformational than that, and as we'll find out over the next 90 minutes, for me the better definition is simply about creating a great workplace for great people to do great work and love every single minute of it. I'm now going to talk about this guy. Does anybody know who this is? Everybody shout out who this guy is.
Buckmaster.
Sorry?
Buckmaster.
Jack Welch.
That is Jack
Welch.
Welch. Correct. The simple thing about him, you can read his words on the left-hand side there, is if any of his team, any of his businesses lost their team, he immediately changed the leader. Because he felt engagement with employees was the number one on the list. The other 2 things that was critical to him was to understand customer satisfaction and also to measure cash flow. And he was determined that those 3 things always gave him the right answer. Employee engagement was always at the top of his list. And his track record was quite remarkable. For 20 years, he delivered an average of 23% annual total returns for shareholders. which is a pretty consistent and remarkable performance. We're now going to conduct a little poll, but because I'm going to talk to you about why engagement pays. Yeah, it's quite an incredible sort of set of results. It was researched by leading analysts that came back with these amazing facts and figures after investigating highly engaged organizations, comparing them to those where they had, generally speaking, a lot of disengaged employees. So Chester's now going to launch a poll, and there's a series of questions that I'd like you to try and answer. Okay, you've got 4 answers. So click on the one you think which probably sums up the benefits of employee engagement.
Give me a thumbs up. You can see the poll. Thanks.
When everybody's completed, Chester, if you'd like to sort of shout out the results, and I'll give everybody the actual figures.
Just waiting for one more to come in there, Colin. Okay. The poll. Share the results. So that should be sharing. You should be able to see what the majority of people have now got. Colin, you should be able to see those results as well.
Unfortunately, they're not appearing on my screen, Chester, for some bizarre reason. So if I could rely on you to read them out.
Sure. So question 1 in growing greater revenue growth. 50% of people think it's 2.5 times. Slightly fewer people for 1.5 times.
2.5 is the correct answer.
So
on profit.
Question number 2, annual net profit is greater than. The majority of people pitch for the second answer. There's a blend between 50%, 100 and 200%. We've got 9, just under 40% have gone for that second one, Colin. 200%. Nobody
200%.
50.
Okay. And then accidents at work.
Accidents at work. Most people have pitched for 60%, the third answer, but a spread across the other 2. Lowest being down at 15%.
Very good. And days off sick.
Absence is spread between 75, 65%. There is a spread across all 4 answers though, Colin.
Yeah, the answer is 50%. And the other one, which is the
Lower employment.
Lower employment, yeah.
Yeah, 70% of people have either gone between 30 and 40%, the last 2 answers there.
40% being the correct answer. And net promoter score. Is everybody familiar with the concept of net promoter score, firstly, which is where you will recommend to a friend or family member that they can come and work in the organization. So you're very happy to promote the business. It's part of an engagement questionnaire. It occurs quite frequently. We'll come on to that a little bit later. So what have we got there, Chester?
We've got about half of people have gone for 35%, and the balance pretty much all up at 40% higher net promoter score.
Yeah, 24% increase. And then we've got productivity.
So productivity, the increase of productivity is either 18 or 26%. Those are the key 2 answers people have gone for.
Okay. And finally, we're talking about higher customer satisfaction. So in terms of customer satisfaction ratings.
80% of people have gone for 12%. The rest have gone for 9.
And 12% is the right answer. So those figures are quite startling. So if you actually look at the impact that actually fully engaged employees can have in your organization, it's quite a stunning effect. What's scary, as you'll find out a little bit later, is how many people working in your business at this moment in time are probably highly disengaged. But we'll come on to a discussion about that. What I'd like to do, first of all, is also say motivation clearly represents a key part of engagement. Do we all agree? Yeah. So they talk about motivation being as easy as ABC. So let's understand why. So there's a principle of autonomy. Everybody wants to feel as if they have autonomy in the workplace. The B stands for some sense of belonging to the organisation. And the C stands for competence. Am I trusted? Do I feel competent enough to do the work that's in front of me? If I could achieve those three things, then I'm going to feel motivated. But is engagement actually as simple as that? Any thoughts? So let's ask a question. Andy Smith, give us an opinion. Do you think engagement is as simple as that? Just autonomy, belonging, and a sense of competence? Is that going to make a difference to how people are feeling?
I think definitely, Colin, it would make a difference, but it's all about, from my perspective, is having the right building blocks for people to be engaged with the particular business. And of those, I think actually, to me, and what's important to me is that sense of belonging, of being within a team and engaging as a team, and that's a real key part for me to get the team engaged with their business.
Thank you, Peter Liner. Thank you for joining us today. You've experienced an awful lot of companies, met an awful lot of MDs over the years. What's your thoughts on sort of the elements of motivation that link into the principle of engagement?
Well, I go along with autonomy, belonging, and competence, but I'd also add valued. People need to feel valued, which I think is equally important.
Mm-hmm. And Chloe, you spent years in sort of HR and driving the performance for a lot of organisations. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's shifting. At this particular moment in time, I think the thing that's missing here that hasn't been mentioned so far is, particularly for generations coming through, is meaning. So I think any organisation that can't create a really clear relationship between what the business is trying to achieve and some sort of societal impact and or meaning, then the rest of this is probably going to fall.
Very good.
Fall away. So I think that kind of like engagement with what does this business do and how does that impact the world and how can I talk to that in terms of the work that I'm doing day to day.
Right.
Great.
Thank you, Colin. I'm just going to go over to Kim. He's an expert on Zoom with his hand up, so thank you for that. What are your thoughts?
Too much teams, actually. The word I was going to throw in there was enjoyment. I think it's important that people in the workplace actually enjoy what they're doing, and it's good to have a laugh. It's good to have a joke when you're at work. And I think, if you don't enjoy it, then there's not much point in doing it. And that applies to a lot of things in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just going to read out a couple of the texts that have come through as well. You need a unifying goal, aspiration, and how you contribute to that and make a difference as a team and an individual. Thank you, Victoria, for that. And Alexandra, I would add purpose. Absolutely. Purpose to the list. There must be a common purpose, goal, similar ones there. Thank you. Another lady, Rachel, you got your hand up. Thank you for using the tools. We love it.
Do my best. Actually, someone's just said what I was going to raise as well, which I think is about clarity. I think it's, about everybody really being on the same page and understanding exactly where they're going and how they can contribute towards that, I think is really, really important, which is slightly different from purpose and meaning.
Thank you. Let's look at it from another perspective. Have you ever been miserable at work? Yeah. So, Richard, have you ever been miserable at work?
I can speak. Miserable at work. Yes. When things don't go right. But I think everything that's just been said, I completely agree with. I definitely firmly believe in purpose and vision. I work for a sustainability business where impact is the key driver of why people work there. So having a mission and purpose. But what comes with that is transparency and consistency. It's easy to get it right when the business is going well. When things aren't going so well, it becomes more difficult, and people see a company losing direction or losing a sense of their mission and purpose in order to feed the bottom line on a short-term basis, and then that's when problems arise, I think.
Good point. Amanda, you're a great advocate of this, because you often used to ask us this question: what does it feel like to have a bad boss and be miserable at work? I remember you saying you've had a couple of examples of it. Would you like to share a few? What does it feel like?
Yeah,
what does it feel like?
Absolutely atrocious boss ones, and I felt completely undervalued. Everything I did was not good enough, and it basically made me feel like I was worthless, actually.
It's an awful feeling.
It's horrendous.
In the book, sort of The Truth About Employee Engagement, was written by Patrick Lencioni. This picture of a plant represents some of his concepts. He says a plant dies from the roots. If the roots become rotten, no nutrients can be absorbed at all. And eventually the rot spreads and it withers and dies. That's a lot like people in bad jobs. You feel like you're sort of withering and gradually sort of dying away and feel totally demotivated. He suggests there were 3 root causes for it, so it'll be interesting to get people's perspective on this. The first one is anonymity. Yeah. So actually, does anybody even notice me? Is there any recognition? Do I feel valued? Am I invisible? I ultimately become totally despondent. His second one is irrelevance. Everybody had a job where you don't actually understand how it makes an overall contribution to the organisation. Is it making a positive impact? Have you been told? Is that work meaningful, or does it feel totally pointless? The third thing is immeasurement. How do you know if you've achieved anything if there are no goals and no measures? If you don't know what the goal is, how can you possibly feel at all motivated by the work that you're actually sitting around doing? Has anybody any other thoughts, any other cause of, or what it feels like, or any other cause that links into making you feel miserable at work, that feeling that actually you're going to wither up and die? What about you, Kim? Have you got anything else to contribute on that?
Yeah, I think a feeling of lack of support, and also I think there have been cases in the past where I have felt that I've been put under pressure in high pressure jobs, whereby there's no sense of gratification from the people that you're reporting to, or indeed yourself. So the job just becomes not enjoyable at all.
Absolutely. I've experienced that myself. I'm going to come to Victoria. Thank you for putting your hand up. I'm not sure if Colin can see those, so I'll keep navigating around.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, so I guess one of the things that's very demotivating is when there is not a level of accountability that's passed across the organisation. So what I mean by that is this sense that you can be working exceptionally hard in difficult situations to get things done, but other people aren't held to account. And weak leadership can mean that as a result of that, people are allowed to slide. And I think that is probably the fastest way to get rid of good people, because it just demonstrates a lack of fairness and a lack of ability to hold others to account and improve. Everyone wants to excel and improve and deliver their best. And when you see others that aren't, that's very demotivating.
Absolutely, and disenabling. Yes, Ian, thank you for your hand up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it connects quite well with the previous slide, actually. Because if I look at sort of my own experience when I've been unhappy in a work environment, it would probably be those 3 things. It was, my autonomy was being eroded. I didn't feel like I belonged in that organization. It was moving away from my own values, and the competence of the people around me, and particularly the people above me, was questionable. And I think that, fundamentally, that led to almost all of the other things that people have spoken about from my perspective in that sort of situation. So it's, I think going back to those points, I think they are really fundamental things of engagement.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. We're now going to give you an earworm. Yeah.
which I think Pip is just about to pass on an earworm for you, that you'll remember, right, for most of today, and it'll probably still nag away at you over the next sort of 24, 48 hours. But what is the difference between motivation and engagement? Yeah. So the concept of motivation, does anybody shout out sort of what they feel is motivation? What is actually motivation? How would you describe it? So can we make start? Is it Sharon I can see? Sharon, what's motivation? Just give me a quick statement about motivation.
For me, it's feeling like I make a difference at work. And a lot of the things that we've already discussed, being recognised for what you do motivates me. It's not, perhaps when you get to my stage of life, it's not about the money that you make necessarily. So it's those other things that get you out of bed in the morning. And feeling like you make a difference and that you're known to make a difference at work.
Absolutely. Sam's got a hand up. Sam, over to you.
I'd say motivation is the desire to continually improve both yourself and your own performance, but the performance of the company, and be a constant learner, learn to improve yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And one of in the chats here is saying, is one personal and internally driven, and the engagement is the externally focused and delivered by others. Great point there. So I'm just going to play a little song, if any of those people know it.
Love and marriage, love and marriage.
Can you hear that?
Horse and carriage, this I tell you, brother, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, so Q Frank Sinatra with the principle of love and marriage, the same as horse and carriage. You can't have one without the other. You can't separate them. It's just an illusion. So we've talked a bit about motivation. So we're saying motivation doesn't exist or you can't achieve engagement without motivation. We'll get into that a little bit later. But motivation is about the energy. It's the fuel. Sometimes it's driven by a sense of competitiveness. So a lot of elite sports people are motivated by a sense of competitiveness that goes on in life, and that's very much about motivation. Give me some thoughts again on engagement. So I'm just going to put a little note here. So anybody want to shout out their thoughts on engagement? So what about Matt? Matt, what do you think? What's the difference? So quote something that means engagement rather than motivation.
Well, I've just seen it flash up on the chat, which I thought was very succinct. Motivation being I want to do it, and the engagement being I want to do it here. Yeah. So I struggle to articulate better than that, to be honest.
Yeah. So we touched on it earlier. There is that sense of belonging that crosses forward again. That there has to be this feeling of a common goal. Yeah. Anybody else got some thoughts? Understanding the why, very much so. I noticed that come up in chat. It's about an emotional connection.
Colin, I would say that maybe engagement is what carries you, much like a goal that carries you beyond that motivational piece. So although your motivational might wane because of external factors outside of the workplace, actually the engagement is what keeps you there, and maybe what re-energizes your motivation. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, engagement is really personal, isn't it? Because, what engages me and what motivates me and drives me is going to be very different to other people potentially on the call, because we've all got different driving factors and different things underneath. So it's hard to have a one size fits all, isn't it?
Absolutely. And Matt, you challenged Peter to make it even more succinct than initially, and he has done that. And I'm just going to read it out. Is motivation is I, and engagement is we. Well, that's very well put. Thank you, Peter, for that. So not even the words, just gets the letters in there. So thank you.
So Ian Howard, it's nice to have you as a guest. So welcome. Ian, have you any thoughts you'd like to make a little contribution to this?
So I was just thinking about this. So I sort of see engagement has been very, very much linked to why. It's that sort of, there's a real sort of driver. If, to be engaged in something, I have to actually personally care about it. Whereas I can actually be motivated, and I think people can be motivated by things that perhaps are less deep, but are more sort of, if you like, transitory.
Very good.
Motivated to a short-term goal. We want to win that piece of work. We want to deliver this project. But actually, to really engage, there has to be a broader thing that actually means something to us.
So, is engagement probably about capturing the heart? Yeah. And is motivation a combination of capturing the mind, but also an element of capturing the heart?
Possibly.
Yeah. So motivation, the way I'd try and sum it up as well, I think we have some great descriptions, is motivation is a personal commitment. Engagement is a mutual commitment. Yeah. And I think that came through on some of the chat, and I think people have been sort of articulating that as we go along. Sam, I noticed you put something in the chat as well. You were talking about the why. Have you got any other thoughts you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, just that in my previous company, had quite a lot of young adult staff, and gathered them together to explain to them the purpose of the existence of the organisation. It was a trampoline park, but to explain the whole purpose behind it was to create an environment of fun for the family, not just it's a trampoline park where people bounce, and getting them to understand the purpose behind why we existed really helped them to engage in actually providing a better service to the customer. So the why, I think Simon Sinek obviously does a really great talk about why, and I sort of used that as material to give them insight rather than they're not just coming to work. There's a purpose behind our existence. So why is really important.
Yeah. Thank you. So would we all agree that it's a complicated challenge for a leader? Because you've not only got to capture both the logical part of the people that are working for your organisation, but you also have to capture the emotional elements that are linked into it. The good news is that you don't have to be a wizard to achieve it. Yeah. But the engagement cube itself is magical. Because when we get to talk about the cube, there are certain elements. So mentorship as a leader, so it's actually looking at the leader as a mentor, and we'll come on to that as part of the cube. And the cube consists, obviously, quite logically, of 6 sides. There are 9 sort of key goals and objectives. They're all backed up with sort of personal exercises, principles, ways of actually embedding change through your organisation. All we're going to do is touch on a few of them today. But AIM is also about the purpose, so it's very much the why question. The groundwork and the foundations, we're going to cover that in a little bit more detail shortly. The I stands for investment in development. People need to feel as if they're being invested in. Yeah, the C stands for clarity. The worst thing you can have in any organisation is a series of surprises. Yeah, people actually want to know what's happening and the direction of travel. And that all-important component, which is autonomy and teamwork, feeling a sense of team. Let me get on with it. Please trust me to do my job. Can anybody tell me what the L stands for? And it is the Holy Grail.
It's
love.
We like a bit of love, though. Very important.
Yeah. What does the L stand for? It's not love.
Leadership. It's leadership or learning.
No. It's something you want from all of your employees, really, that makes a difference to your ability to deliver long-term and sustainable change.
Loyalty.
Loyalty. Spot on. So the Holy Grail and why the different elements of the cube all lead to actually embedding the principles of loyalty with your employees. Yeah. So let's look at some scary stuff. Yeah. So before we get into the cube itself, let's just look at these worrying facts. So despite the millions invested in employee engagement, and we're talking about a considerable amount of money, Yeah, 65% of people in most organizations, believe it or not, and this is actually work that's been done by leading employee engagement companies that have studied thousands and thousands of organizations, and they find that on average 65% of people actually are still relatively disengaged. So what you have is 35% of the people who are busting their butts, yeah, 52 are sitting on the boat looking at the scenery, and around 13% actually are actively trying to sink your boat, yeah. Did you know that 33% of the people interviewed stated that they would give up a pay rise to see a bad boss get fired? Yeah. 75% of people leaving a company actually blamed their boss for why they're unhappy at work. And the number one thing they said that they want leaders to do more of and get better at was what? Anybody shout it out?
Communicate.
No.
Listen.
Sorry, listen. No.
Mentor.
Sorry, two people spoke at the same time. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, mentor.
No.
Okay.
Recognition.
Praise.
Recognition. Praise, recognition. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the number one thing that they said they wanted more of their bosses and leaders in the organization to deliver for them. Yeah. So let's say this is your boat. And I actually have a slightly different view on this, and that is that I believe that you've got around about 35 to 40% of the people actually within your organization who are rowing roughly at around 20 strokes per minute. And you'll have them in your team. So you'll be given a new challenge. Somebody has said, right, we've got a new challenge, a new objective. You always go to one or two key people in your team because you know they will deliver the best possible outcome. Yeah. So there's around about 35 to 40% of them are rowing at 20 strokes a minute. Rather than them actually all looking at the scenery, I think you'll find that there's 20 to 30% of them who are probably, rowing at sort of 5 strokes per minute. So they're still going along and they're participating, but they're not going at the same speed as others. And then there's about 20 or 30% who are just sitting there actually, they are literally watching the scenery. It's quite nice as you carve your way through the challenges and they're innocently watching everything go by. And then there's another 10 or 15% who are actively screwing holes in the bottom of your boat. Yeah. So you'll find in small organizations often have a slightly higher engagement level. And one of the questions we're going to go into a breakout is I want you to ask yourselves in this breakout why. But the breakout that we're going to do is say, draw your boat. Yeah. So you're going to get into breakout now, draw your boat, discuss amongst your team. My recommendation is you don't have to mention all of your team's names directly, but if you wanted to use their initials or call them A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, think about the people that you're working with in a team or people you've worked with historically in a team, if it's easier for you, and actually talk about your boat with your colleagues. So you're going to get in a breakout, chat it through, but also come back with the answer why smaller organizations tend on the whole to have a higher engagement level, right? So there are probably less people looking at the scenery. Okay, so Chester's now going to drop you all into a breakout, and you have around about 10 minutes to discuss.
Thank you.
I've not put you into a breakout group, Colin, and Jo was saying that she didn't need to. We've got 4s and 5s mostly.
Right.
Mostly 4s.
Could you drop a note to them to say nominate a spokesperson to give us feedback? Right?
Yeah.
Or Bob, or if you bob in and ask them, mate, do you?
Is it a spokesperson or a spokesperson?
Spokesperson, is it?
I don't know. It doesn't look right when it's
It looks good, Chester. I've just seen it flash up now. Yeah, weirdly, I can't see breakout rooms, which is very strange.
Are you a co-host?
I am. But anyway,
The last option below polls, captions, polls, and breakouts.
We were getting a healthy contribution, Chester.
Sorry, say again.
I said we were getting a healthy contribution from people.
Yes,
really
definitely, definitely engaged. An engaged group. You've obviously been giving them some recognition. And then I'll mix the groups up in terms of creating 3 groups later on. So
yeah.
I'm just going to go and carry on with my Slido.
Red cube. Recognition. Measurements. Just going to grab some water.
Sorry about that. So, yeah, I'm wanting to get feedback.
That's right, Joe, you're still recording at the moment. I just want to press. Okay, closing now. Countdown of 10 seconds. Welcome back, everyone.
That's great. Welcome back, everyone. So what we're going to do is ask a spokesperson from each group just to give us a little bit of feedback. The first thing I would ask you to do is to say, how did you find the exercise of actually talking about your boat? And the second thing is, what answer did you come up with for why smaller companies do slightly better on the statistics I presented earlier? So who wants to go first? Can we have a quick volunteer?
I don't mind going first.
Oh, well done, Rachel. Thank you.
I know, absolutely. And you know what? The reason I volunteered to go first is because we actually had a really interesting dynamic or a cross-section of businesses in our team. So we've actually had the real small operators with, you know, one person running their own business through to Rob Merritt's business, which has 18 heads, all the way through to Matt at Cafe Nero, who are, you know, how long's a piece of string? You know, there's so many people there. Exactly. And actually, you know, really disparate and not all centrally hosted and all of that kind of stuff. But both of them used the same phrase, actually, which was collective responsibility. And what I think the sort of, you know, the real difference or what Matt has tried to emulate, which is more naturally there within the smaller business, is creating small boats, is what he described it as. And so making sure that as a small boat of people, they still have a really strong glue that sticks them together. And he was talking about the fact that, you know, he's created a really powerful team that check in together from a really human perspective every single week. And he's now able to stand back and watch that team that have all really become very interlinked and mutually engaged and connected. And so he's able, as a leader of that team, to stand back and actually identify when people are less engaged and be able to then question what has actually led to that particular person feeling less motivated and less part of the team, which was an interesting tactic that he was using.
Thank you. The next spokesperson.
I'll give it a go. Our team, we had quite a mixture of different backgrounds through to different sized businesses, career pit lengths as well, and who we work for now or work for ourselves now. And we talked a lot about how smaller businesses, it's almost more getting into that tribal point. Amanda mentioned the tipping point, and when you get to around 50 employees, that's when you start to struggle a little bit there with the engagement and the pulling in formation under that 50 mark, so all working towards the same goal. Feels slightly easier. I know from my personal experience, I felt that slightly easier within some smaller organizations. And it also, so we're all motivated towards the same goal. We all feel like we've got a bigger stake in the business, and it's more noticeable as well when someone is perhaps not pulling their weight. And that goes the same with almost the negative point of that if someone is not pulling their weight, either you notice very quickly that people are, there's rumblings, there's murmurs within the business, or someone actually comes to you and as a leader and says that, because there's that closeness within a team. Whereas the larger organizations, sometimes feels a little bit harder to do. So I think that's most of our points. I don't know if any of the team want to pick up anything else.
No, well, thank you. Sorry, carry on.
I'll talk on behalf of our team, only because we didn't agree who was going to do the talking afterwards from that perspective. So I'll take that. So within the group of people that we were talking about, there's a variety of different organisation sizes and those that we'd worked with as well. And there was two key areas that we talked about. One was the sinking the boat, okay? And that's where we were sort of reflecting on the people that we've worked with in previous organizations, the negative ones, okay, the ones that there's always something wrong with the business, okay, and then of course you have this element where you potentially start to not talk to or engage with those people as much because they're in essence sabotaging the whole conversation. But we also talked about the size of organization really matters. And one of the things that we felt people were more engaged in smaller organizations was that they just had flatter structures. Okay, and therefore there were leaner businesses, and people within those organizations had like access to more senior people, so there was a higher level of recognition, and therefore that drove the engagement. And also, if you were a high achiever in that business, it's likely that you're able to make an impact quicker and also then move up or be rewarded quicker within that type of organization. And therefore, smaller businesses tend to have a more engaged workforce compared to, I think, the phrase we used in some of those larger organizations is potentially not quite looking at the scenery, but it's the dead wood. They're in such vast departments that almost the size of the department allows these people just to be looking at the scenery rather than be really highly engaged with the business.
Okay, that's great feedback. Thank you. I think we've got one or two more groups here back from quickly.
We had very similar conversations in size and good leadership, bad leadership. One of the nuggets that came out from our group was the fact of time to lead. Or when we're talking about the boat, we asked the question of, can you hear the message or instruction or the vision coming on the boat for everybody in the same place? And what came from that is actually leaders who are really working their vision, their goal, and they're bringing people along, and they have engaged clients and employees, are the people that spend the time leading. And that we talked about the dichotomy of a full-time job as well as being a leader. And sometimes without the balance in that, one aspect fails, and often the leadership aspect and getting that core vision message and autonomy, accountability, and the time to develop often gets lost while they're working their full-time job as well. Peter.
I think certainly in smaller companies, I mean, if you think about, and using the boat analogy, the question you have to ask when you're doing all of this with your team is, will it make the boat go faster? Because that's what you're trying to achieve as a team, ultimately. And in a smaller team, you can have that conversation. In a bigger team, you're going to get numerous answers. You then have to sift through all those. And for some people, and I've seen it in companies I've been in, they will dismiss answers that they don't think are relevant. And yet within some of those answers, there might be a nugget that will make the boat go faster than it's ever gone before. But because they're not actually listening to that individual, because they don't count or value their opinion, they discount it. And that's, you see it a lot in big companies, where somebody's trying to lead and they think by leading they just discount people that they don't value their opinion. Coming back to full circle. But the key is, does it make the boat go faster? That's the key question.
Good point. Have we heard from all groups?
Yes, by the looks.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks everybody. Just my notes there on a small company, you tend to be close to the leader. People did actually start to articulate some of this thing. More often not, small companies are in a different phase of their evolution. So it's a bit of a go-go phase where everybody's sort of quite excited about the growth and you feel slightly more engaged, but also there's just nowhere to hide. Yeah. I work for Vodafone, and in my opinion, Vodafone carry more passengers than Cunard. Yeah. So just to give you a sense of perspective, that very large organizations sometimes create these structures where people have got plenty of places to hide, and therefore they don't have to get on the boat and feel as engaged. They can just watch the scenery go by. Okay, well, thank you for that. I think it was a very valuable feedback, and it'll be useful for these next parts of today's discussion. The next thing is this guy, and there he is, look. Right? That is Erno Rubik, yeah? And believe it or not, he was actually a sculptor, right? So a lot of people thought he was some mathematician, but he was actually a sculptor. Yeah, he invented the Rubik Cube in 1974, and I know there are people on this call who probably weren't even born in 1974. But by 1993, there totaled over 200 million Rubik Cubes worldwide, right? There are 3 billion combinations, but only one solution, all right? That's how it was marketed. So anybody, any idea what the world record time for solving a Rubik Cube was? So anybody want to have a quick shout out?
6 seconds.
6 seconds, I've heard. Yeah.
13 seconds.
13 seconds, 15 seconds, says Chester. Yeah.
8 or 9.
Right. It was 3.13 seconds. Right. And somebody actually did it with one hand in 6.2 seconds. So the skill is, once you actually get the formula and you understand the sequence and how to make it work, then actually you can complete these things with pace. So if we look at our Rubik Cube, so like the Rubik Cube, engagement requires aligning all the colours and essentially getting the sequence right. So we've talked about those being the sort of colours leading to magical, which ultimately delivers loyalty. And what I'm suggesting we do now, if it's all right with everybody, before I go on to talk about the first of these sides, which is the red side, give everybody a quick sort of energy break. So just for 5 minutes, go and get yourself a coffee, walk around, jump up and down, feel engaged, whatever you feel you need to do right now. And I'll see you all back here in about 5 minutes' time. Thank you.
Thank you. See you in 5. Welcome back. Everyone feeling a little refreshed, hydrated, moved their legs, arms and feet from staring at the screen. If you could turn your cameras on when you're ready, that would be fantastic, so we get a little idea of who's there and ready. Give everyone 1 more minute. Okay, thanks, Colin.
Is everybody with us?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, well, let's move forward now on the concept of our engagement cube. But coming back, as you can see there, the sort of concept of magical, when we talked about loyalty. I think one thing to consider with loyal employees stay for what they give. Yeah, disengaged employees tend to stay for what they get. Yeah, so there is a distinct difference again when you're considering the whole principle of heart and minds. So let's just take a look then at the groundwork and foundations. Yeah. So this is the essential part of it. There are 9 components. We're only going to attempt to discuss sort of 3 of them here because it just takes too long. It's a proper workshop to cover this off in exactly the level of depth we need. So we're going to look at this principle here of reward. Yeah. We're going to consider, because it's come up a couple of times, the concept of recognition. And we're also going to look at the principles of measurement. Yeah. We have module stimulus exercise for each of these squares, so we're just going to run through these. You'll find as we go through the cube that there is one statement or one cube that comes up in 3 different colours. All right, and we'll be talking about that one towards the end because it's a pretty fundamental building block to the principles of engagement. So first of all, let's consider the concept of reward. I'll start with an opening statement. Salary or money or wages or bonus, on the whole, only tends to demotivate people. Yeah. The reason why wage, money, salary demotivates is that we always feel we're worth what we're getting paid. But when we feel that somebody might be earning more money than us, or we feel there's a job outside there that's similar to the one I'm doing, which actually is offering more money, all of a sudden we start to feel demotivated. So what happens? Our boss drags us in, he has a chat about remuneration, he says, actually, okay, fine, we're going to give you a 15% pay rise, which feels great. You go back home, you talk to the family, I've just got a 15% pay rise. Around about 6 to 8 weeks later, you think, well, I was worth it anyway, and everything moves on. But the interesting thing, in 2009, an experiment was conducted with 2 capuchin monkeys, yeah, that were separated by a perspex screen. They were trained to collect pebbles, and the reward for collecting these pebbles was actually a slice of cucumber. They were both happy with this exchange, and everything was going fine. But then one researcher gave one of the monkeys a much tastier grape. The other monkey actually became totally and utterly furious, threw the cucumber out of the cage, like started jumping down, spat, rattled, and showed constant displeasure. one of the principles of reward, it's so easy to get it wrong. Yeah. And a question for you guys is everything fair in your organization? Is everything equitable? Are there any signs of favoritism? Because if any of that's going on and you're doing that as a leader, I'm going to guarantee you that somewhere is a monkey throwing out their cucumber. Right? In 1970, the Wimbledon men's champion received 7 times more than a female champion in prize money. Both were a sellout at quarter-final, semi-final and final stage. Yeah. And if you use the principle of 5 sets that men play compared to 3, then as a differentiation, then 1.7 times would have been fair. So yes, we've evolved since 1970, and I'm not going to ask you one in 1970. If there's anybody who does know, I'm quite happy for you to do a quick shout out. But it's just the principle that understanding how important getting this component of the organization is right. And we can't go into the entire module, but what I wanted to do was just give you a flavor for some of the things that can actually go into this very complex concept of how people feel rewarded. Anybody got any thoughts or would like to add a few examples to this where they've seen it happen in their own organization? So very quickly, is there anybody out there?
I'll go. I've got a great example. My husband used to work for a cheese company, selling cheese around the world, predominantly Dutch and Dutch cheese. And their annual reward, if they hit said figure, said profit, was that they would take the company and their partners away for a 4 to 5 day weekend, somewhere of choice around the world. And that not only motivated, but it engaged everyone for the greater good, not just their own individual rewards. And therefore, not only did they often get the reward, but when they were there, they re-engaged on a social level with their team and partners and the wider community of their business. And it became an us, not an I. Fantastic. I've been to a couple of lovely places. But it's just a different way of thinking about reward. Any other thoughts?
Right. So the question is, think about it, reflect on it. Is anybody really throwing out cucumber in your company? Is there actually something that's actually just doesn't feel right? And are you as a leader, or at any point in time as a leader, been showing probably slightly more favourable approaches to certain members of your team? It could quite easily be those 3 people who are sitting in the front of that boat or whatever it is, the 35% that you're doing that with. But that could be another reason why the rest of them are looking at the scenery. Yeah. So just consider that as an important principle. The next slide is the principle of recognition. Everybody know who this is?
Shout out.
Michael Phelps.
The legend himself. Now, I know there's a certain Sam Williams here who actually is very much into the world of swimming. So I'm going to ask you, Sam, how many Olympic gold medals did he win?
Was it 48?
Gold medals, I'm actually told it was 23 gold medals. He won 82 medals in total.
Okay.
Yeah, through his career. Yeah. Compared to most people remember Mark Spitz, who had 9 gold medals, so just pales into insignificance. And Ian Thorpe, the Australian swimmer, who actually had 5 gold medals. Yeah. Can anybody tell me how many of his medals, what percentage of his medals came from team events?
I would say 60, 70%.
Yeah, 50%. Yeah.
Yeah, it was around 50%. Did you know that that is the highest achievement in terms of team medal achievement for an elite athlete? So in terms of people who actually are at the top of their game, who choose to participate in the team events, that is the highest percentage sort of split in terms of volume of medals and everything else than any other elite athlete has ever achieved. I think that's about right, isn't it, Sam?
Definitely. definitely. And I think obviously swimming isn't necessarily regarded as being a team sport, so that's even more significant.
Yeah. So was it actually gold medals that motivated him and engaged him? Does anybody think that's what it really was, that actually got out of bed for, was to win a gold medal?
No, absolutely not.
No.
Wants to be himself.
Yeah. So where was his true engagement? Where did he get that feeling of being fully engaged, and what really gave him a sense of recognition for what he was doing? Yeah. Anybody? Any thought? Sorry, Sam, you were saying something. I missed you.
Well, being part of something bigger than himself, I think, was key to his motivation. Obviously, yeah, he was competing and outperforming himself all the time. But I think when it came to the team element, it's, you know, as a swimmer particularly, it's being part of a bigger purpose, contributing to representing your country and winning for your country was more of his purpose than for his own personal gain, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're spot on. His engagement with the sport, his actual dream was to bring swimming to the masses, was to transcend the sport and prove that swimming was not just every 4 years. Yeah. Which I think is a wonderful way to look at the sport that you're involved in. He was happy to do things that others were not prepared to do. So when he was actually developing his strokes and all the rest of it and trying to perfect things, he actually worked for 5 years without a single day off. Yeah. The strange thing is, the man that beat him in his best event, which was actually the London Olympics, was a guy called, I bet you Sam knows who this is.
Oh God, I can't remember his name. It's a Chinese guy that got done for doping.
Was it a guy called Chas Leclos? Yeah.
Okay, no, that's different. I'm thinking of a different event. He did a lot of events, but there was a swimmer that beat him, but was done for doping, which wasn't great. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, his father was more thrilled than he was.
And Chas Leclos was inspired to take up swimming by Michael Phelps, right? So Michael Phelps had this sort of greater purpose, and recognition actually came, believe it or not, if you really study, was the praise that he got from his coach and the praise that he gave himself. Yeah. So his recognition came from achieving small goals every day. How many people have you got in your teams who are achieving small goals every day? Do they feel the gratitude for achieving those small goals every day? Any thoughts? What about you, Matt? Any thoughts?
It's a simple act of saying thank you, isn't it? When you know, your team update you on something, and they've put, you know, even if you've asked them to do something and then they've done it and they come back to you and done it, it's a simple task, that simple thing of saying thank you. And, you know, just stopping what you're doing to say thank you to them. You know, it's such a massive difference, because you know how you feel when someone says it to you, right?
And
it's not. We are overwhelmed with this everyday business that we forget to celebrate and to thank people about the small achievements.
Any other comments from people?
Yeah, I think the recognition, this definition of recognition is so important. You've just mentioned it, Matt, about thanking people, but people, the small task itself isn't the thing that gives people the satisfaction or the engagement. It's the recognition for that small task. So yeah, it's fundamentally important. One of the issues we have at work, this is a side topic, but we have a very, very flexible working from home policy. And we've seen recognition levels dip, or motivation levels dip, because people are working at home too much and are not getting the recognition by interacting with their peers and their managers.
Great point. Great challenge of hybrid working.
Ian Howard, I know you've worked in some quite impressive organisations over the years. What's your thoughts on this?
I think one of the things I was just reflecting on was that I think what you quite often see in people who move into sort of senior leadership roles is they don't always have the same need or desire for recognition that you perhaps see in other parts of organizations sometimes. And certainly where I've seen that happen, that can make you a bit of a challenge, because they actually don't always understand the need of people within the organization to receive recognition. So particularly if you're focused on sort of big goals, big deliverables, where you get recognized for achieving those, not for those little things along the way. So it can be easy to miss.
Yeah. So Phelps said to his coach, make sure that you give me the praise and recognition for achieving the little goals. Yeah, the little targets I've set myself. Yeah. I will congratulate myself, but I need you to really help me to do that. Yeah. Which was an important part of actually building up the sort of skills to move ahead in his chosen profession.
I think it was also a two-way street. There was a period of time when he was in his younger years where he did push back and he wasn't coming to training and he wasn't performing, and his coach, obviously the leader, fed back and sort of said, this is a partnership in a sense, we need to work together on this. If you're not prepared to show up, then I'm not prepared to show up, kind of thing. So I think there needs to be that level of communication between employee and leader as to, I'll show up for you if you show up for me, if that makes sense.
I think understanding the motivation of your people, if you're leading people as well, because I think there was a really great example of the cheese company sort of motivating people with holidays. If that was me personally, I don't get thrive on holidays and travel. I would hate it. I would be absolutely instantly demotivated if that's what I got at the end of it. But that's very specific to me.
Yeah.
That's actually understanding people really makes a big difference. Because then you can you can put the recognition where it matters.
It absolutely does. So thanks for that, Ian. And we have sort of 3, 4, 5 exercises that actually coach leaders to understand how to actually sort of take time to reflect upon their team's achievements, take time to understand what you think they're brilliant at, right? Because you should be telling them what they're great at. I really admire you, because every time I go to you on this particular issue, you're always the one who comes up with an answer. There are so many times we actually miss that type of communication and feedback. And we have a few exercises that help people and to navigate the way through practices that improve your ability to end out gratitude. Yeah. Let's look at the simple principle. Yeah. If you don't measure it, most people feel demotivated. If you want to achieve an engagement or have an engagement strategy, yeah, you're going to have to measure it, aren't you? It's quite obvious. You're going to need to know what the key measures are. So how many of you have a dashboard of measures that actually really underpin the principle of engagement? So can anybody shout out a few sort of measures that would tell you if you're achieving reasonable results on an engagement strategy? Richard, how about you? Have you got one?
I'm not sure this is terribly helpful, but we measure attrition rate.
Yeah. Attrition rate is actually one of the key measures. So very good. Yeah. Any others?
Sickness.
Yeah, sickness is another good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absenteeism.
Yeah. Any others?
Daniel. Daniel, you've got some. I'm sure you measure.
Don't have a lot to add, actually. Attrition and absenteeism, we're there as well. And unfortunately, we don't even have a dashboard. So quite far behind, I would say, in that sense. But at least something.
We do actually do something on the positive side of this, because I suppose by the time you get to sickness or attrition issues, then your engagement is something that was long down the road. But we do a staff satisfaction survey every year as well, to find out how people are feeling, levels of engagement, etc.
You know that customer satisfaction is directly proportional to employee satisfaction. So most of you will do a customer satisfaction measure. And I'll tell you that a very disengaged bunch of employees will be giving your customers a fairly rough end of the stick. Yeah. Okay.
I think, sorry, just quickly on that point, the place that I've seen this done in the best way was McDonald's. To sort of link to the point about customers. So basically, in McDonald's, they evidence and correlate the performance of each individual McDonald's store from an engagement point of view with its sales, and they call it the people profit chain. So basically, everyone in the management chain in the McDonald's operations system, from restaurant level and above, is measured on their restaurants' engagement scores. And they used a team of professors from Lancaster University to create a sort of explicit relationship between those core elements of engagement being pride, commitment, competency, etc., and the sales of each individual restaurant, which was obviously about as powerful as you can get in terms of getting people on board with the importance of it.
Yeah, that's great. So there are some great examples. McDonald's sounds fantastic, actually, Chloe. So you know, if you've got a one pager on that at some point, it'd be worthwhile flicking it around, and we can discuss it. It'll add quality to what we're doing here. So as we go through this particular sort of dashboard, so employee performance, so things like your quality, the quantity that you produce every day, the general levels of efficiency, they're all impacted by whether your employees are engaged or not. So they are tangible measures that if you're certainly in FMCG, production environment, or whatever you're in, that are actually important. There's a great external measure, which is obviously Glassdoor. That pretty much tells you how people feel about working in your business. Did you know that 40 million people use Glassdoor every single month? Yeah. So just to put it into context, the sheer scale of it. You've got things like your return on investment. So what's your revenue per employee? What's your profit per employee? What's your training spend per employee? It's all linked in. You can run various ratios that help you to understand sort of whether that's actually paying off or not. Customer satisfaction, you've obviously got Trustpilot out there, which gives you a good indicator if you're in that type of business. But similarly, you've got your own customer surveys. And then you've got what I describe as worldwide benchmarking, which is the Hoover's scale and also Gallup, and we'll be discussing that in a breakout shortly. But then it's sort of how happy are employees. So that's your employee satisfaction survey, which you ought to be conducting, which will cover specifics related to your company. And as you go further around, you've got things like that net promoter score. Yeah, how likely are you to recommend, right, to a friend or colleague, which is a great question that appears, but is a separate measure and KPI. Absenteeism, we ticked the box on that one a little bit earlier. And we also talked about attrition, but reverse it actually, Richard, call it retention rate. Yeah. So, you know, it's how you actually are retaining your staff. But there's an interesting thing a lot of organizations do. So I'll talk about Rolls-Royce in a second, which is called voluntary staff turnover rate, right? As you may probably realize, because it happens about every couple of years, Rolls-Royce announce significant redundancies. Yeah. Do you know Rolls-Royce actually managed to fulfill all those redundancies with people who volunteer, yeah, to leave the company? Yeah. Now, the pay benefits at Rolls-Royce are pretty spectacular. And therefore, actually, when they decide to pay people off and let them go, they pretty much, on most occasions, fill it all with voluntary redundancies or a number of contractors that they're also employing. So your voluntary staff turnover rate is also a very good indicator of actually how you're performing as an organization. How many of you actually look at these sorts of figures? Is that a very comprehensive sort of dashboard that perhaps nobody is currently using? Yeah. No. Well, what we're going to do in a breakout, we're going to go breakout shortly. You're going to discuss how many of these different measures you're using, but also what I want you to do is to consider the very important scales, which are UVES and Gallup. Yeah. And so if we look at the Gallup questions, we've deliberately here here to make it much more difficult for you, because we've had a discussion, obviously, about various things that affect people's engagement. We've taken out some of the words, right? So those of you who are familiar with the Gallup questions have an advantage, really. So I'm sure, let's hope one of those land in each people's groups. But try and work up or understand what questions do you appear on the Gallup 12. It is the most renowned, well-known measure of employee engagement and employee satisfaction surveys. It's got more benchmarks than any other survey that's done. And the second one is the principle of the Utrecht Work Engagement Scale, or UVES, which is developed to look at three things, which was vigour, dedication, and absorption, which they felt were actually highly important measures for making sure employees were engaged and they were committing the principles of hearts and minds. Yeah. So again, what sort of questions do you think get asked on the principle of vigour? I've given you one under each heading. It's an opportunity for you to go away and discuss it, and to head off into a breakout. Yeah. Where what I'm going to ask you to do is, how many of these questions do you use in your company? So actually, that by questions, that was how many of those measures, sorry, that's a spelling mistake that we saw earlier, are you using in your business? Yeah. And can you work out what the rest of the questions are? Yeah, on the principles of the best practice of Gallup and UVES. And we will reveal all when you return from your breakout session. There should be a member of the Uspire team to help you to help facilitate, and they have the questions to hand, so they'll be able to talk you through it. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in around about 10 minutes, I think.
Just one, Bill, there's quite a lot there to get your heads round. So each breakout room on the UVES scale will just answer one section. So Chester, can you just align who's going into what room so you know what section on the UVES you have to do? Otherwise, we could be having a long discussion.
Yeah, so one group do vigour, another dedication, another absorption. Sorry,
that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I've created three groups, one on reward, one on recognition, and one on measurement. Yes. Is that the way around that you wanted me to organise them?
No, vigour, dedication, and absorption. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all right. That's fine. People will be fine once you get in the room. They'll have a member of the Uspire team with them in the room anyway. So thank you very much indeed. See you in around about 10 minutes time. Thank you.
Second. Okay. Okay, here they come, back in 5, 4, 3. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone. That's great. So what I'm going to do now, just before we hear from the spokespeople, is reveal the 12 Gallup questions. Yeah. So take a moment to look at those questions.
They also went out in the handout, Colin, that's in the chat for people to be able to download.
So they've got the full, right, so they've probably already seen them, but take a look at them, see how you think you've got on in each of your groups. Okay, and I'm going to give you the Utrecht Work Engagement Scale. Now, all these questions people will be asked, probably strongly agree, number 7, you know, strongly disagree will be number 1. There'll be various different scales attached to them. I'm sure Chloe has seen all sorts of different ways in which these get measured, but yeah, this is how the indicators are generally used. Okay. Okay. Right, so on that basis, can we go back from the first group, please? How many of the actual dashboard measures are you using as an organisation? And obviously, how do you feel we got on sort of trying to get to grips with those Gallup questions, having already explored some of the principles of what it feels like to be motivated and demotivated and engaged in an organisation? Who likes to go first?
Our group can go first. Daniel, do you want to summarise? some of those questions that we thought. Or maybe Daniel's frozen. Matt, you're a participant in some of those conversations.
So, yeah, we didn't actually talk about Nero, but I can say at Nero, we use a lot of those things to look at employee engagement. And also we're getting a better understanding of the impact of some of these scores as well, because wanting to have a score. So absenteeism. So what we're recognizing is absenteeism is a major cause of angst at store level for the people who have to take up the slack when someone doesn't come in for their shift. You're left short-staffed, and that then impacts their well-being, their motivation, their mood, their ability to deliver great customer service, because they're a person down, 2 people down have just called in sick that day. So it's one thing to measure it, there's the other thing to understand, and I guess the next thing is, well, what are you going to do about it? So there was a lot of discussion around measures, but it's what do you do with those measures once you have them, else it just becomes like death by power spreadsheet, doesn't it?
It does.
Next group, very quickly.
I can feedback on ours. We were talking about absorption, and actually our themes, we talked about this really much more bottom up, actually, about what absorption felt like to us. And I think what we came to was actually that it was quite personal, and obviously it really does vary people to people, what allowed you personally to get in the zone, and what are the key factors that actually motivate you to be absorbed around your work, and how important learning was, and also I think one of the other things that we talked about that hadn't actually really come up yet in this conversation, but was entirely relevant, is around quality of work and pride in what you're doing, and how actually working together as a team, not just as an individual, but within your team, and actually being able together to create work was better than something that you were able to create off your own back. How important that would be for not just from a personal absorption perspective, but when you apply that to a group.
Thank you. That's great. Next group. There was a third group, I think.
Yeah, we sort of muddled through because I wasn't 100% sure. I didn't have all of the materials there. But when we were looking at this, we focused in on dedication, Colin. And we were starting to look at some of the questions that you would ask as a collective to that. And so from an anonymous perspective, it was things like looking at whether someone was looking to leave the business within the next 1 or 2 years, asking them questions around, does the company's purpose align to your individual needs? Will you be looking to recommend the business to others? Looking into things like, will you do everything that's required to achieve your particular objectives? And a really big question that came towards the end is almost, would someone be willing to take a pay cut to continue within the business? And as that's come up in very recently in a number of sort of organisations as cost cutting, etc.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks, Andy. That's great. One of the exercises that we do as part of this particular module is explore whether any of these statements as you go through Gallup and you go through Utrecht actually capture heart or mind, or both. Yeah, so something particularly capturing heart, something particularly catching mind, because the whole principle is how the whole engagement thing actually comes together with an individual. And it's useful to work down them and just think about each of those statements in that context. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. That's been very helpful. So we're now going to look very briefly at the principle of mentorship and the leader. Yeah, and we're going to talk about a couple of things really. We're talking about leadership style, but we're also going to come on and talk about this particular component here. No surprises really that this is the one that appears 3 times as you work your way through the cube, because trust is pretty fundamental. Do you trust your organisation and what it stands for? Do you trust your leaders? And we'll come on to that in a few moments. Actually, leader as a mentor is a concept that's beginning to gather more momentum, yeah, through organisations. It's a slight change in philosophy. Chloe, very briefly, I'd be interested in your opinions on some of the stuff that you've been doing in organisations and trying to get leaders to think of themselves in this way.
Yeah, I think it's personally, I think coaching as a leadership style is more important than mentoring. So the difference being mentors kind of tell you what they did and what you might do on the basis of their journey, whereas coaches are there to prompt and unlock what's within you and your sort of journey. So I think coaching as a leadership style is critical right now. And I think from a performance management perspective, what leaders really need to be looking at is coaching capability in those conversations. So, not gaining your kind of, as I have gained a coaching accreditation in order to deliver formal executive coaching, but doing that work, understanding coaching and developing yourself as someone who has coaching conversations, I think is going to be really critical to developing high performing teams going forward.
Yeah. And I think that's right, Chloe. I think you find that coaching is a pretty fundamental element of people in management roles moving up into sort of key leadership roles. The further you get up the ladder, I think you're starting to think that you do a little bit more mentoring and coaching when you've got very senior executives. So I think it's a very interesting sort of take on the whole thing. Let me talk about this organisation, Halfords. Yeah, we all know Halfords, don't we? Their principle is we all need great leadership to feel engaged. So it's no surprise that Halfords believe that employees are much more committed and engaged if they can respect and trust their leaders. Yeah, they do something that's quite scary. Their operating model that drives the business also challenges leaders to continuously improve. They measure against this by creating what they call their leadership index. So for every leader, which is based on how the employers view them as a leader within whatever part of the organization you sit. And that is a published scale that is available for everybody to see. So if you are a leader, you are being constantly measured and monitored by the people who are working for you. And they believe that is the way they can drive exactly the right level of engagement and build respect and trust throughout their community. It's quite a scary concept. We could get into this. Sorry, somebody about to speak? Sorry. We can get into this principle, which is what's the difference between leadership and management? Yeah. So we could start shouting out and say, what are managers? Managers what you do. Leaders often about what you say. There's an element of rational thinking when you're a manager. You're trying to actually deal with more emotional intelligence as you become a leader. The manager is doing things right. The leader is doing the right things. Yeah. So we can talk about very distinct differences in how the concept of leadership and management evolves, and go into that in quite a bit of detail. But the other thing we always like in our organisation is what we call an engagement champion. Yeah. So if you're an engagement champion, so if you're one of these developed leaders, yeah, what sort of skills do you think that you have if you're a highly developed engagement champion and leader? So can I hear out from people? The little sort of symbols should give you a bit of a clue. So let's start. Chloe, you kick off. You give us one. So if you're an engagement champion, based on those symbols there, what do you think these actually mean?
Gosh, I have absolutely no idea about interpreting the symbols. But I can tell you what I think an engagement champion should be doing. I think, first of all, they need to be individuals who are knowledgeable and empowered. So people who can fill gaps on behalf of an executive team and leadership team by kind of deeply understanding the purpose of the organization. And yeah, sort of making sure that within their area, usually I would appoint one per area in the organization, make sure it's a ratio that means they can get their arms around people. And yeah, they should be there to really drive and enhance the communication about what's happening in the organisation.
Understanding and sympathetic.
Understanding and sympathy, absolutely. Trust as well, yeah.
Team player.
Would you trust? It's a great question.
Peter, sorry, what did you say? We didn't catch that.
That's a team player.
Team player.
Yeah.
And the mirror one here.
Approach the feedback. Yeah. So great leaders are quite happy to receive feedback. So really what you find engagement champions do that. The other thing they do up here is they show their vulnerability. Yeah. So they're authentic in the way that they actually conduct themselves. Yeah.
I think it's
sorry, that
up to your mistakes as well.
that's self-aware.
Colin, just one moment. Sam, sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I think it's important as a leader, if you make a mistake, or make owning up to that and admitting where you may have gone wrong, so that your staff recognise that your own humility, if you like.
Absolutely. Yeah, humility.
Yeah. Here is resilience. So how does a leader behave when actually things are going wrong? Yeah. Over here is when things go well, practicing the principle of gratitude. We talked about it earlier. Yeah. Over here is their attitude to knowledge. Yeah. Are they arrogant and feel that they know everything? Or are they constantly trying to learn and evolve as individuals? So when we're looking for people who can drive engagement, these are the key principles that we're actually looking for from these individuals. And obviously one of the fundamental ones sits here, which is the principle and concept of trust. Yeah. So what we have is what we call the trust barometer. Yeah. Because those 3 slides all actually cover the subject of trust. So engagement cannot be achieved without it. And the trust index, which is a tool that we're using, we're going to hear from probably 2 or 3 people who have actually completed the trust index. Yeah, was work based by leading psychologist Rempel and Holmes. It's based on their work from about 1986. Yeah, and it's been evolved and developed as a useful tool to understand how actually organisations can measure trust as a 360-degree measurement. Yeah, so within the trust index, there are essentially 4 pillars. Yeah. Anybody shout out what they think those pillars are?
Competency.
We've got predictability. We've got dependability. We've got faith. And we've got clarity. Those are considered the 4 pillars that actually perform their duties within the concept of the trust index. So the trust index is a series of questions that get asked. Firstly, I know my boss is going to react in most situations. My boss can always be counted on to act as I would expect with no surprises. Yeah. As you can see on the right-hand side, we've got P, D, P, C. And as we work our way through it, there are 24 questions. And as you work your way through the trust index, it's also inverse. I know my team are going to react to most situations. My team can always be counted on to act as I would expect them. So as a leader, you are completing this questionnaire. And then in reverse, your team are also giving you feedback. So Pippa, do you want to just talk through sort of a high level how this tool has been used and what impact it's had? I think Rob has also completed it, so he's quite happy to give us a little bit of feedback.
Yep, absolutely. What I would quite like to do is sort of almost pause here for you, just have a little read of those questions. I'm conscious that we are 5 minutes to the end and everyone's got things they need to do and to be. What I suggest is that we drop these questions into the chat for you to download, and you have a chance to spend some time reflecting upon them. You may want to utilize it within your team or your company and also fill it in for yourself. And on our next meeting on 27th of February, which is a face-to-face, we can pick up these final few stages of the cube, starting off with this trust element, to be able to share and understand exactly how the results come out. And more importantly, that's come up through in all the groups is, so what is it we actually do about it? What is the impact or the view that, what difference am I as the leader going to have to make to adjust these scores? The top line element, having done this within our team, is a real understanding of me as a leader versus the team, where I see myself, where they see me, Do I think I'm better than I am in terms of trust and dependability? Do I give clear advice or projection or ambition? And the biggest reflection part of this exercise is, how do I score myself versus my team, and where do I really come out? Often you might find people who are very degrading of themselves but highly value their team. Those kind of results come out. If you are slightly overconfident and not actually performing as well as you can from a trust or dependability, that element comes out from the scores and the indexing that answering these questions and scoring them can give you. What is great is that it also gives you the areas which you can improve upon, because they are grouped within the actual groups. For a smaller company and a new company that's re-burgeoning or in its earlier stages compared to a large company, often you will have closer scores. The challenge as we grow, as we get bigger, as we employ and work with more people, is how do you maintain that score as a leader? How do you engender that trust? How do you give plans with clarity? Do they really depend on you when you have more people to work with? Very similar to the dichotomy that we had at the beginning of the session on the boat. The smaller the boat, often the trust is easier to obtain because you're working within a smaller group. So Chessa, can I just confirm that you've been able to drop those questions in? If not, we will make sure that they come out on the pre-read afterwards for this session.
Just coming, just trying to.
No problem. We've got a bit of time. Does that work for everybody, to have a bit of time to read them through and to work that out within their own teams first, and we'll pick it up at the next time?
And there's an example of a leader, very briefly, who felt he trusted his team more than they trusted him. So there was a bit of a distinct sort of wake-up call when that index numbers actually came out, particularly on the principle of clarity. He thought it was very clear. His team didn't think he was quite as clear as he needed to be. So a very interesting piece of feedback.
Absolutely. And I mentioned in there the next session for the network, and I just thought I'd just spend a minute just overseeing what the network is for the next thing and introduce you to somebody else who just come onto the call. So for those of you who are new to the Uspire partnership, the network is an infrastructure that is absolutely designed for you as a leader to help you understand and give you guidance, some knowledge, and most importantly, some peer-based interventions that you can work with other people in similar situations. Coaching, as you've mentioned here, is through the heart of our network. And we have a large number of executive coaches here to work and support with you, through you, in anything that you need. And that choice is yours. We have a selection to make sure the chemistry is right. We manage that through our peer-to-peer meetings on a bi-monthly basis, aiming to be face-to-face. And our first one face-to-face this year will be in London on the 27th of February. So pop that one in your diary. We will be having our super speaker coming in on the first instance, and we will continue the final parts of this engagement cube of some of the content that we haven't covered today, and picking up with the trust forms. So not very often we give any homework, but a little bit of homework to go back, read, reflect, and do, and to bring that along to kickstart us off on how you found it and what does that then mean in terms of feedback, autonomy, teamwork, and clarity. So the morning session, I'm going to hand over and welcome you to a colleague of ours who's working very closely, Claire Brumbury. Welcome, Claire.
Hello.
To just give you a little soupçon of information about what the speaker session will be on the 27th of February. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pippa. Hi, everybody. So my name's Claire Brumby. I'm a speaker, a coach, and a trainer, and my sweet spot is all about personal power. So with that in mind, just pop in the chat box. When I say personal power, what's the first word that comes into your mind? Yep, confidence, charisma, smile, passion. Yeah, all of these words and more. So from passion again. So for me, it's like this self-confidence, it's this resilience. There you go, Sam, thank you. Confidence, empowerment, adaptability, self-belief, all of these things, you know, we get rid of the imposter, we really step into our power and we can own this and go forward. And it's quite telling actually that some of the words that Colin had there on the engagement, there were some of these words that came through. So second question, how do we feel it impacts an organisation when the people in the organisation are truly stepped into their personal power? Pop in the chat box, please. How does it impact? Energizes? It sure does, Ivan. Yep, they've got clarity. Yeah, it drives them forward to success. Authenticity, it uplifts everyone. Yeah, absolutely, Ian, thank you. People believe that we're going somewhere. Yep, Pippa, enthused, motivated and culture. There are studies that show that people who step into their personal power, the organisations who embrace this, the organisations are more adaptable to change, they're more innovative, they can navigate through things that come thrust at them, and there's a more harmonised feeling within the team. So what I'm going to be talking about on the 27th is how we engage and harness our personal power for growth. And I'm going to take you through my own personal story where I got absolutely battered to death in the den by the dragons, and through a messy exit of my global FMCG brand to step into, rediscover, step into and understand my own personal power to become the coach and the speaker that I am today. So I really hope you can join us on the 27th, and that's a little bit of a nugget of what I'm going to be sharing with you and how we do all of that. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, well, I hope I see you all. Oh, actually, I've got a question for you guys. Got one question. If you were to step totally into your own personal power right now, what would you do differently? Now, I'm not going to ask you to share it. Hold that. And I would love for you to bring the answer to that question on the 27th and tell me what you've done differently from the 23rd of January to the 27th of February. What have you done differently to stand in your personal power? And what have you seen the impact of that being?
Claire,
so on the 27th. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I certainly feel enthused and motivated now already. What a fantastic way to close our session. I'll just hand over to Colin for any final words.
Yeah, just a few final thoughts, and that is when people work for you, they shouldn't have to leave their hearts at home. Yeah. And as Simon Sinek said, people won't love your company until you love your people. So there's a few principles of engagement to take away.
Fantastic. Thank you. From today, you will get the copy of the notes and questionnaires and the information coming out for the next session for the February the 27th. So look out for that on email. Make sure it's not popping into your spam or junk. You've got the content from us, and we look forward to seeing you in February.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.